Welcome to the Hunting Beast Podcast, your source for hunting tactics, news, and stories. And now your host, Mario Traficante.
Hello, and welcome to this week's edition of the Hunting Beast Podcast. This week, Dan and I will continue to answer questions from the Hunting Beast Forum.
And it was amazing. And you've seen different deer doing that.
Yeah.
When it's this position where the camera's always there and always checked.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes it interesting, nonetheless. All right. Next one we got here. Dan. At what point do you write off a buck bedding area? A certain number of sits with nothing home, or only small bucks? Lack of mature sign throughout one season, 2 seasons? So I think he's kind of asking like you just give up on a spot.
That's a good question, and it's a hard one to answer because there's probably places I give too much time, and there's probably places I don't give enough. But a lot of times I'll look at bedding, and I'll look at it and I'll say, if I was a big buck, I wouldn't lay here. I'll move on. Because you got to remember, I look at thousands of beds a year. Most of that is just written off. I'm looking for the features that hold a big buck, right?
Right.
If I find those features and I hunt it and I don't see nothing, I'm going to hunt it again. I'm going to probably give it a few times. And there's spots probably where I probably should have and didn't go back. There's probably spots I put too much time into because I believed in. And there's been a few spots, and this goes back to an earlier question that I didn't answer. Somebody with, but anywho,
latest tactics.
yeah, latest tactics that I've learned.
Yeah.
Here's one that I've learned in the last couple of years that's really starting to sink home, is that a lot of times those bedding areas that look so hot turn out to be night beds, where they're actually chewing their cud or whatever, they're going down and laying down for a couple hours and then getting up. And those, what I'm learning in the last few years here, something I didn't know in the past, was those sometimes are worn to the dirt, and sometimes really got all the features, the backdrop, the wind direction, and everything that a daybed has. Because they still got to be protected. They still got to be protected from wolves or whatever, or, in their minds.
Right.
Okay. So, a lot of times, I might be hunting this spot and not seeing anything, going, how can I not see it? There's big rubs going in there. There's rubs in the bed. The bed's got a backdrop. It might be night bedding. It really might be. And one thing I'm seeing with the night bedding is it usually is close to the food source. But sometimes day bedding can be too.
Right.
But when you see it far from the food source, like a swamp island or something, I've never seen that be night bedding. They're not walking out to the swamp island to night bed.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But, so I will write something off if I'm not getting action there.
Yeah.
If I'm going in there and I'm hunting it and I throw a September at it, I throw a rut at it, I throw a late season at it, and I do that a couple of years in a row, I give up. I might not even give it a couple of years personally, but this guy, I wouldn't want to tell him that because I've got a lot of options.
Yeah.
I've been doing this for years. I got a lot of great spots. If I'm not seeing action someplace, I'm probably not going to waste too much time here. What will make me waste a little more time there, and that was kind of the guy's question, what will put me there a little more often, I know there's a huge buck in this area. I might give that spot more chances because that's up my odds for that huge buck.
Yeah.
I
mean, and I think too, it's depending on how many spots you have. A lot of you guys are doing a lot of good scouting, and you're building that catalog of spots. So, I've heard some guys say, "Well, I have 10 or 15 different sets that I feel good about and I want to get to." So, really, it's a personal comfort level. Like if you have an early season set and you go sit it, and nothing transpired, then move on. Maybe set up a plan to rotate back to it. And early October, mid-October, or during the rut if it plans out right. But move on to your next spot. That's your next early season set. Or if you've got a property that you can kind of stage hunt, where you're advancing further in across the property as you go. That's, if you're too cautious, you're never going to get close enough to where you need to be. If you're too aggressive, you're going to bump a deer, but then you're going to learn.
One thing that these guys got to remember, like with this guy with asking me that question, is there's spots I got where every time I sit there I see a big buck and I don't even go back. Because I tend to go after a certain animal or a certain area.
Yeah.
So it's not really apples to apples with somebody starting this out.
I convinced Dan to send me to those spots that he has big bucks at.
And I have. The one deer last year, I see so I don't know if I should shoot him or not. And then you went in there, and it was a fun hunt. And
yeah, I mean, I
think that buck made it through
up.
the season, and
yeah,
he should be a whopper this year.
Yeah, I mean, something moved at nighttime during bedding. He might have known I was there. The gig was up. That's the third time back there. Your 2 times plus mine. So, but
yeah, that was a nice buck, and I had two opportunities in a row to kill that thing. The second time I couldn't have killed him, unless I could make a 50-yard shot.
It'd be a good early season sit this year.
Yeah.
Because you get that nice high cover off that point.
Yeah, that's a good one. Let's just discuss that for a minute, because I think that's a good hunt. Is I went in there and I hunted this primary bedding area. That's, what do you say it is? Maybe an acre. That's probably pushing in size.
Yeah.
A little smaller than an acre, 3/4 of an acre
Yeah.
of tree growth in cattails that's in water. It's completely surrounded by knee deep or better water. Some of it's probably waist deep. But all these trees got high spots and beds.
Yeah.
And you get in there and there's rubs and they're high and it's public. And I mean, it's a great spot. It's surrounded by pressure. I mean, there's pheasant hunters and squirrel hunters and deer hunters all around you, but they don't get in close enough. And I've got it pinned down to, it's like cigar shaped. So I guess I could do a map. Mario says I got to draw maps.
Don't draw it too detailed, no.
I'm going to draw right exactly how to get there. So you got this cigar shaped area that's got trees mixed with cattails. And then you got woods over here and woods over here. And this is where all the hunting pressure is, over in this area, right? And you got some tamarack trees and stuff over here, real sporadic in water. And you got one tree over here and some dogwood, right?
We use a darker marker to
Okay.
show up on the...
So this one tree a guy can hunt in, and this tree's been pretty good to me in the past years, but it died and fell over and I couldn't hunt it no more. But now a limb that was coming up next to it grew up big enough where we can get a stand in it now. And there's a tree here. And those two trees pretty much cover both sides. But this is swamp, and there's other bedding in here, like along here and over here and over in here. Yeah, over here there's some. And so there is spots they can be in other spots, but this is the primary bedding right in here. So the first time I went in there, wind's coming like this, so I hunted over here. And that buck got up out of a bed right in here and came past me like this. And he come in range, and I had him, how far do you think that shot was? Probably...
You said it was like 35 or 40 because it was...
I think it was 35, yeah.
because it was high wind. And
yeah, it was
you
right
weren't
on the end of my range, and I thought I could make that shot easy.
But the
it
wind
was real windy.
Yeah.
And I just didn't want to risk wounding the animal, so I didn't take the shot. And then I went around, and the next day, the wind was blowing like this, so the next day I could hunt. So it was going like this the one day,
Yeah.
this the next. So the next day I went in and hunted here. And when I got in here right away, hot sign was coming out like this. There was heavy rubs coming out this way. And I know from experience that over here's where all the hunting pressure is. To follow that transition through the thick swamp, they got to go this way. That's what makes this tree killer. And even here, They got to come out like this or like that. So that makes this killer. So when I went here with the other wind, he actually got out of a bed that was only 50 yards from me, and it's really noisy getting in there. It's that deep water, and
Yeah.
but he got up here, and instead of taking the trail that went right underneath it that he should have, he looped like this. And then we decided to give Mario a try, because after getting a real good glimpse of him, he was nice, he was shootable, but I just had something else on my mind at that time of the year. And Mario came in and gave it a shot, and he had it moved too, but I don't think you've seen it, did you?
Yeah, I didn't see it. Something moved over here, and then right at dark, something moved out of here. But I didn't see either animal. But yeah, it's kind of one of those cool little spots, because you're literally overlooking this bedding spot right in front of you, and these trees that are sitting right out there. So it's.
And then you went in there with me in spring, didn't you, when we did the workshop? Because I actually did the workshop. I took people in here during our workshop and showed them where we sat up and where the buck was bedded. And the bedding in here is killer. When you see that, you'll see the kind of bedding that I pick.
Yeah.
The kind of stuff that I hunt over and over again. Because there's literally, this is probably from here to here, maybe 100 yards, maybe tops. And there's probably 40 beds in there. And the beds are worn to the mud, and there's rubs in them all like this. In different heights, and, you know, it's pretty good. There's big tamarack trees in there just rubbed.
I mean, I could see on a really windy day going in there why that worked to your advantage, because it's such close quarters. You're so tight in there, and it's really hard being quiet. I mean,
you know, too, the beds are here and here. You're sitting here, you're 50 yards from the bedding, and here 50 yards from the bedding, probably even closer here.
Yeah.
40 yards from the bedding, and if you shoot a deer, it's last light.
Yeah.
But there's pressure out here and here, you know.
Yeah. No, it's a good little setup. So, all right. See what we got here. Next one. So this is kind of similar. Dan, I know you talk about only one sit per bedding area. Is this only for areas you have hunted for many years and have a history with? Have many new bedding areas this year? Is multiple sits, 2 or 3 throughout the season, to figure out if they're worth sitting a good idea? This is my plan to get some history on each spot. So this is kind of similar to the last question, you know.
Okay.
How many sits is a...
Well, no, the way he said it is a good question.
Yeah.
And I'll hunt a spot more than once if I've got an inkling that there's a big buck in there.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to overhunt it. And 3 sits a year is generally to figure it out. I like not hunting a spot more than once or twice in a year for a good reason. It isn't just because, I think it's burnt. Another part of that is as you start to sit those spots, those bucks figure it out. There's no coincidence at all that the majority of my biggest bucks have come from a spot that the very first time I've ever sat there. I don't think that's coincidence at all. And I think if you start looking back into your own history, you'll see the same thing. That not the majority of your deer, but that really big one that you either saw or you shot was the first time you're in a spot, because they figure out where you hunt. They get that down. They're in the spots where nobody goes. Right. And if you go there, somebody's going there. And that's why they're no good. So you gotta back off. You gotta, I can remember one spot that I got. It's no good anymore because other people got on it now and it's been abused. But that spot for many years, the first time I'd go in there, I'd always see a pope and young. I'd always have one walk past me. That spot held the biggest bucks in that particular public land every year. It was a great spot. And you could kill one there every year. And you could go in there a second time and kill one. But if you did, you start pushing it. And I had to, say, no, I'm going to go hunt someplace else. Even when we had multiple tags, I could hunt it 3 times a year tops. But you could see the degradation when I hunted it 3 times in 1 year.
Yeah.
The next year it wasn't as good. Those deer learn that. And you're hunting a deer that's 5 years old. Those deer don't get to be 5 years old by hanging out where people kill them.
Right.
And they will learn where you're at. They will pattern you. So that's the main reason that I'm hopping around. I mean, it's not the main reason. There's several reasons that kind of work together.
Right.
But you got to hop around. And really, the 3 hunt thing is more I'm trying to understand that most of the guys that are following what I'm doing don't have as many spots as I do. They haven't done the scouting for 40 years like I have in this method, finding these spots over and over again where I've always got stuff to fall on. I think a lot of guys have 15, 20 spots like we're talking, and that's got to last them the whole year and every wind that they got. If I tell them they can only hunt it once, they can only hunt 15 times.
Right, and that cuts into just enjoying the hunt and being out there.
Right. I think 3's pushing it though. 3 a year is pushing it, or you're going to ruin a good spot.
Yeah.
And I've had like really good spots where you see somebody found it, they moved in and they set up a tree stand, and they might only hunt it 5 times in a year, but you just watch that place just drop off to nothing. Until the guy gives up and he leaves, and it takes a year or 2, usually 2 seasons, and it starts coming back around.
Right. Right. All right. Next question. Dan, is your best buck bedding area only best during early season, the rut, or late season? Or is it the best all year long? The real question is, I'm assuming number 1 buck bedding area will hold a mature buck all year long.
My best bedding areas do hold bucks all year round. And my best hunting for mature bucks has historically been opening week, which is contrary to most people's thoughts. Even beats rut. And people would say, no way, I see way more big bucks than rut. I'm not talking about big bucks, I'm talking about the biggest ones. Mature bucks. When you get 5 years or older, I see more daylight movement and further movement in early to mid-September than I do during rut. Now, that's probably not fair to some of the listeners, because some of the listeners probably don't hunt to start their season until October 1st.
Right.
Because that's the way most states are. But Wisconsin, Minnesota, those areas start mid to early September. And that's when I see my best buck movement in daylight. And that's not what other people are seeing. They're not pushing envelopes like I am. Yeah. Most people early season are hunting like wussies. They're sitting on the edge of fields, or you know what I mean? They're sitting on food plots and they're saying, well, I'm seeing deer. They're coming into food plots in daylight, but no big ones.
Yeah.
But you got to hunt them like you hunt them in October. You got to hunt in those bedding areas on the edges of them. And you get away with more. You got more cover. You can slip in there. You don't get seen. Yeah. There's all kinds of birds and stuff making noise at that time. It's almost still summer.
Right.
And you can get away with more, get closer than you can once those leaves are dried out and crunchy and cover's open. And
yeah. Yep. All right, next question. Dan and Mario, I'd like to hear more about observation sits. I understand they're meant to gain that missing piece to your final game plan, but what's the rule to using an observation sit? What terrain do you mostly use them in? How close is too close? The terrain I hunt is hill and river bottom, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on them all.
The only rule is there are no rules, right? So I use observation stance in every terrain. And I guess the mindset for most people would be that farm country would have the best observation stand. It probably does. Your probably best use of observation stand is in farm country, but that doesn't mean they're not in swamps and hills and everywhere else. A lot of times there's a spot where you can still be in hunting, but you see an area before you go in there. And I'll tell you, most male hunters have that thing in them where they gotta kill. They gotta prove they're a man. And they think of a observation hunt as a wasted hunt. As, yeah, I could get some intel out of that, but I really want to be over where the deer are and kill one. And they go in, and if you're off a little bit, it's over.
Yeah.
Sitting back and making an observation and then moving in is not a wasted hunt. I try to put myself where I could still kill something in daylight and justify where I'm at, because that's that male thing of wanting to kill something. But observations are key. I think swamps are the other big one for me from farm hunting, is because of swamps. Usually where those deer are is actually low cover, and you can get up high and see through patches and see them real easy. And those observations, you can get close, see what's going on. River bottom's the same. You get that open terrain along the river bottom because of flooding and stuff, and you can see into those patches.
Right.
But there's still that in hill country. I mean, you can be in a position where you can see a long distance, or you can see multiple bedding areas from one spot. I mean, I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, I mean, how close is too close?
How close is too close?
If
you're going to get too close, you might as well go in for the kill.
Right.
Because if you get your scent in those areas and they know they're being hunted, well, then an observation works against you. In case and scenario with that is, I can get close in suburban terrain, for an example, like where people are all the time.
Right.
But you go in big woods where they don't see many people, and get in, 400 yards from them, and they freak out when they smell you've been there. So every scenario is a little different, and you got to kind of take that stuff into your thought process. A lot of times, an observation stand might come off of a walking trail. I'm real close to a walking trail, but I can see into what I want to see into, or someplace where they expect humans. But if you're going into timber terrain where people don't walk much, and you're getting close, I mean, you should be a few hundred yards back, and you should be in a direction where they're not going to travel.
Right.
Or you're in a kill position if they travel that way, but if they travel a different way, you're in a position to see and you can move. If you get what I mean. If they do come your way, you're going to kill them, kind of thing. But you don't want them to smell that you've been there.
Right. I mean, I think, maybe that's a day that the wind isn't in your favor, but you can set up in a different spot that's high up in proximity to that bedding that you think is located there, and you can observe and check it out. I think the way you got to look at it is if the wind is right, other conditions are right, and you're really confident in where that bed is located because you scouted it in the preseason and you know right where it is and you have other intel that tells you, then go to it and hunt it. But if you're not sure, then get far enough, be as far back as you can be where you still have a good vantage point that with daylight left, you're still going to be able to see that animal move and get intel on where he's coming and going. And then it does kind of solidify your plan. Then you can slide in the next day if the weather's right. And
a lot of terrains too, you can use a silo, get really high up, right behind the farm where deer ain't going to be worried about you, and use a good spotting scope where you see long distance.
Yep.
A lot of times you can do observations from a car or a truck. And the thing about doing it from a truck is you can get out there last minute.
Yeah.
You can have 15 minutes that day before dark after work or something. Get out, observe something when you get the next day, which is Saturday, to hunt.
Yeah.
So don't overlook the use of a truck or a car.
Well, and I think too, you think about it, guys, if you're during the summer, if you're running the back roads and you're watching deer, you're doing observation sits.
Right.
If you're shining at night, you're doing observation sits, because we talked about this before. If you have the opportunity and time to do that, it can be a lot of fun, and it's fun to see deer. But think about why those deer are coming to that location at that time and how it relates back to bedding. And, you know, how far have they traveled to get there based on the time it is during the day, and where do you think the bedding is based on that field where you spotted them? Or maybe you have a vantage point where you can see down into a valley that's a pinch point of a river bottom, and you can see where these deer cross. You know, so it's,
Yeah.
you know,
Sometimes too, you know, it sounds kind of weird. It's probably maybe a little far stretched, but an observation can be, you know, like when Andre called me up and said, "Hey man, there's a huge buck in that one field every night when I'm shining in your area."
yeah,
You know, or it's you're overhearing somebody. You know, I went and killed one of my biggest bucks because he saw that buck in one of the areas where I hunt and told me about it. I went and looked for it, found it, developed a pattern, started glassing, started watching, started observing, and then moved in and killed it. And there's other times when you're like at the store in town and somebody comes over by me and says, "Man, did I see a buck on the other end of the swamp?" You know, and think about the Rome legend. I first started getting wind of that because everybody in town was talking about it. And you're hearing this, and you're overhearing stuff, and you're just a silent guy in the corner, kind of like buying a Coke and looking like you're reading a Coke, listening to this guy saying what field he saw it and when he saw it. And loose lips sink ships, man.
yeah. That's
And,
a good point, because
That's an observation. I didn't see it. The only trouble with that is some people, reality and stuff are kind of bent, you know. I can remember one where a guy saw this giant buck over and over again, and I go to hunt it, and it's this little 8-pointer, and that's what he was seeing, you know. But to him, it was a big buck.
yeah,
But that's the stuff you got to weigh out, you know. But that's an observation, you know. It's how far you take it. You can't sit in a tree watching them or in a silo watching them with a spot and scope and no bow the whole season and kill something.
Right.
At some point, you got to move them for a kill. But at the same point, you can't think you got to just rush in there like the bull in the china cabinet every time and that you're going to be successful your whole season. You got to have checks and balances. And you my point to this guy is, if he's asking these questions, he's probably leery of using this technique. And maybe I'm reading you wrong. Sorry if I am. But my point would be, just go out and do it. Give it a shot or two. And when you start seeing success with it, you'll probably change your tune.
I think you'll have fun with it too, because if you get that situation where it clicks, where you had an assumption and then you see it play out, or you see this deer get up for bedding, or you put the pieces together of why this deer is traveling the way it is, then, you know, it's really gonna solidify that for you, and then you're gonna have more fun putting your plan together and getting in closer. You know.
Yeah, there's you know, some frustrations with that too. Sometimes you sit back, you move in, the buck don't come out the next day, and you're like, if I would have just went in there and hunted,
Yeah.
you know. And I think somebody asked me one time. I remember this. This goes back like a year or two ago, but it kind of caught my attention and made me think a certain way. He said, "You know, I heard you talk about observing this buck and you didn't kill it, and I heard you talking about this buck and observing it and didn't kill it. How many times do you observe bucks and you don't kill them?" And I thought about it for a minute, and I thought, you know what, probably 3 out of 4. You know, I see them, I move in, I don't kill them. They either don't show up or they change a little bit, or some factor changes something, and I don't kill them. And in a lot of cases, maybe I could have killed them, maybe not. But then you start thinking about it, and hell, I'll take 25% odds any day.
Right. So it goes back to that balance of how many times on your first sit were the times that you shot that animal versus, I mean, there's no way to 100% absolutely know that unless you know through previous intel that that bed is there and that mature animal is there that night.
And here's the big thing with that, is that mature bucks, when they get to be like 6 years old, are way more repetitive than the 3 or 2 year olds.
Yeah.
And the 3 and 2 year olds are going to give you fits. But when you run into that mature one, you're going to kill it. And what are you hunting? It goes right back to that again. And some guys cannot get past that I have to kill a deer, and as long as I get something over 120 class, I'm happy. If that's what makes you happy, fine. But I might even shoot something like that myself, and I do. But it's not my goal.
Yeah.
It's not what I'm out there for. And if I'm out there to shoot mature bucks, if I want to shoot a kingpin, I have to hunt a kingpin. You have to put yourself in the game. You know what I mean?
Yeah. All right, cool. Next question here. Dan Mario, rain as cover. Also like to know how y'all use rain days to your advantage on the spectrum of scent. Say you have a close encounter with a target buck but need to make an adjustment. You get a similar wind condition and rain to wash out your scent away overnight or even during that hunt. Do you hunt the same bed, making the adjustment, or scratch that spot off for a later date? Really just your thoughts on how rain dictates how often you hunt a particular bed. Granted, we agree rain washes away human scent from an area. I believe it does, but haven't had enough opinions weighed in on the subject after asking honestly.
Okay, here's where I'm going to go with this. I'm going to say that a real heavy downpour washes away your scent. But a light rain might not. And a lot of cases in the woods, you'll have spots that'll hold your scent. Rain doesn't hit every spot. There's going to be block spots, and it'll hold your scent. So your scent will still be there somewhat. But a good downpour helps. It gets rid of scent. I don't care what anybody says. I've seen real positive results on deer reactions to where I've walked after it's rained. I've had people say that it's rained and deer spooked anyways, and they do. But I've seen a much better reaction after a rain day. So I'd rather go in there before it rains if I'm going to go scout or something. But to get back to your point, if I see a deer, I don't care if it rained or not, I'm going back in after the next day. I'm moving in. I'm taking a chance.
Yeah.
Rain is a huge benefit, and sometimes I can't go into a rain because of the noise factor. Because that'll take away a lot of the noise. It'll take away the crunch factor out of leaves. And the rain itself makes a noise that's a cover noise.
Yeah, rain, wind, and noise. Rain and wind, a weather front that's moving in. You hear guys talk about this on the Beast a lot. If you can slide in during the time that weather front is going on, you're taking advantage of the cover that weather front is creating by way of sound, by way of scent, and all that stuff. And we've all seen this. A storm front moves in. Every animal in the woods, your birds, squirrels, chipmunks, deer included, they kind of shut down and they go for cover. I think that's their instinct if a storm front is moving in. When that storm front rolls out, we've all been in this scenario where the weather breaks and the woods kind of come back to life and animals start moving around, so I think you can take. That concludes today's podcast episode. Please go to thehuntingbeast.com to post any discussions, questions, or comments regarding today's podcast episode.